Okay, we're in Ayin Amud Aleph, and we're at Hayman Demochu, which is 5 lines from the top of the page. Omar Shmuel. So Shmuel said, Hayman Demochu. So we're continuing with the different cures, and we have here Shmuel Hayman Demochu be'alunche de parsoi. If somebody was smitten with a Persian spear, Michia Lechai, he will not live. Why not? Because they tipped their spears with poison. In the meantime, they should give him meat, fatty meat on coals and undiluted fresh wine. This can extend his life. He can live a little bit longer, and therefore he'll be able to instruct his household before he dies. Amr of Idi Bar Oven. Rabbi Dovid Yehudah said, Hayman de Bola Zibura, somebody who swallows a hornet, Michil Echai, they won't live. In the meantime, to try to extend his life, Nish Nashke Reviosa the Cholo Shamgas. You should give him a drink, a revius measurement of strong vinegar. Maybe he'll live a little bit longer and be able to instruct his house, what to do following his death. Rabbi Levi said, if he eats the meat of an ox with lefes, which is turnips, he sleeps at night in the open underneath the moon on the 14th or 15th day in the tekufa. A tekufa is this is the time between the solstice and the equinox. So it'd be in the months of Tammuz, Av, and El. Sleeping outside on the 14th or 15th day is not a good time. Why not? Achastu achilu. He will become ill with the illness of achilu, which we'll see in a moment what that is. Tana, we learned someone who fills his stomach with anything. In other words, he overeats. Achastu achilu will get this illness called achilu. Even if he eats dates. Gemara says, Pshita, why would dates be different? I would think, since we learned, if you remember this Gemara, I believe was in Ksubis, in the end of the first paragraph. Yeah, you don't base. Tamari dates, masban, they satiate, umashachnan, they warm the body, umashalshlan, they don't cause constipation. Ashron, they provide energy. And they don't make people into a maphonic is someone who has very fine tastes. So eating dates does not cause one to become spoiled. Maybe even overeating won't be as damaging. Kamash Malon, but no, even overeating dates can bring on the illness of achilu. My achilu, what is achilu? Rabbi Lozer says, Eish Shalat Somas. It's the fire of the bones. My Eish Shalat Somas. What exactly is that? Rabbi Eish Garmi. Apparently, Eish Garmi is more intuitive than Eish Shalat Somas. To us, they both translate as roughly the same thing. Eish Garmi means the fire of the bones. Okay, Maya Susi. Maya Susi, what's the remedy? We're about 8 lines into the wide lines. What's the cure for the fire of the bones? Rabbi says, my mother told me. Again, the mother of Rabbi wasn't his mother; it was his nanny of sorts, the one who raised him. Generally speaking, kulu shikaini tilsa v'shiva u'treser. Typically, when you give a medicine, the medicine is taken in a dose of 3 days, 7 days, or 12 days. However, for this disease called achilu, adamitzi until you become healed. Kulu shakaini, every medicine, aliba rekana, you take it on an empty stomach. The high boss of the achal v'shasi, this is taken on a full stomach. It's after you eat and drink. And you go to the bathroom to relieve yourself. The nafik, you go out and wash your hands. Okay, and then what do you do? What's the medication? Buna de the talpachi, a fistful of lentil porridge. Ubuna the Chamer Atika, a fistful of aged wine. V'nigbelinu bahadi hadadi. You knead them together. V'nechol and eat it. And then when he finishes eating it, he should lay down. V'nechach b'stine. He should wrap himself in a blanket so he starts sweating. V'lekva denukmi adikoyim in avshay. Nobody should wake him up until he wakes up on his own. When he wakes up, he should remove the blanket. If he doesn't take off the blanket, the illness can come back. Okay, here's some grand advice from Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet tells him, Nosson, here's a good idea for life. Eat a third of your hunger. Drink a third of your thirst. And leave another third empty. Why? If you get, in case you get angry, then you'll be full. And evidently, when you become angry, it's sort of the food in your stomach. It feels as if it expands, and if you're completely full and it expands, it's not going to be pleasant. If a person wants to be spared from intestinal illness, he should be dipping his foods summer and winter. If your meal gives you satisfaction, it gives you pleasure, be careful not to overindulge. And if you need to go to the bathroom, don't wait. These are all advice not to get this intestinal problems. Ukva gave the following advice. Someone who drinks this special type of wine called white tilya, he will be seized with feebleness. Amar of Chizah says, there's 66 types of wine. The best type is Sumka Richatna, a red wine that's very fragrant. Grey Dekulu, the worst of all, Tilya Chevra is white Tilya. Okay, Amar of Yehudah. Yehudah says, Haiman de Yosef B'tziparnei. One second. Haiman de Yosef B'tzafrani Nisan. He sits outside on the mornings of Nisan, Gabi Nura next to the fire. B'shayef Mishcha, and he puts oil over himself. V'nafif Yosef B'shim. He goes out to sit in the sun. Echas Tevitek. Feebleness will seize him. Toner bottom. The rabbis taught somebody who lets blood and is intimate that day. Havilan bonin vitkin. His children will be feeble. If both male and female let blood that day and they were intimate, Havilan bonin bali rasan. Their children will get rasan. If you remember from Ksubis, rasan is this terrible illness, sort of destroys the flesh of a person. Omer of Chizah says, this is only true if you didn't eat. But if he had something to eat, less lanba, there's nothing, he'll be fine. Omer Rabbi Rafuna says, someone who's coming from a road and he's coming from a journey, and he's intimate with his wife, his children will be feeble. Toner Rabbanon, we learn Tababi Mesakise, someone who exits the bathroom. He should wait approximately 9 minutes before he's intimate. Because the demon of the bathroom that escorts him. And if he is intimate, his children will be epileptic. They'll have seizures. If someone is intimate standing, he's liable to be seized with a severe cramp. Sitting down, he will get the illness of delaria. We'll explain soon what delaria is. He malmala b'hu milmato. If the woman is on top and the man is on bottom, delaria, he's liable to get delaria. My delaria, what is delaria? Or Rav Shimon Levi, Sam delaria, dardora. The antidote for delaria is dardera. Okay. The article, the notes over here in the article point out that it could be what it is a fit of yawning. The Gemara doesn't exactly describe what dardora is, but what delaria is. But the solution is dardora. My dardora. Amar Abaya says this is what you need to do. Ma'rike dechuchi, saffron that grows in hedges of wild thorns. Rav Papa olos of olalei. Rav Papa would chew the saffron and swallow it. Rav Papi olos v'shodilei. Rav Papi would chew it and spit it out. Okay. Amar Abaya says, Misha eni bak v'darech haaretz. A male who's impotent. Lacy, he should bring gimel kapize kor to me. He should bring three kapizas of kor to me dechuchi, saffron that grew in a field of sheep manure. V'nidkinu v'nidukinu v'nishlekinu b'chamra. He should grind them up and boil them in a mixture of wine. V'nishtin, he should drink it. Rabbi Yechon said, "Hein hachziruni l'nuroisai." I tried this potion, and apparently it gave me the strength of my youth. Okay. Now the Gemara goes into a sort of moves slightly into the good for your health things, and then we get back to the regular Talmudic discussion. A couple of minutes.
Thank God. I never thought I'd miss a straight up discussion of Gittin. I never thought I'd look forward to going back to that. Yay.
I was waiting for your previous comments, but I guess they weren't forthcoming. 3 things weaken a person. But Elohain, and these they are as follows. Pachad is 2 types here. Pachad means, hold on. Okay, I don't know how to translate. I don't know what the best words are in English. I'll just describe it to you. Maybe someone will have a better word. There's 2 types of pachad. One is sort of a short-term pachad, one's a long-term pachad. So, if somebody's in battle, there's an imminent pachad. It's an imminent fear. And then there is sort of a general, he's always nervous. Anxiety might be the better words. So there is this very imminent anxiety because he's on a battlefield or he's running away, he's on the run. And then there's the fight or flight type of anxiety. And then there is the anxiety of, the guy's just concerned about earning money or making a living or, going to work every day or something like that. So that's what pachad is. Derech is a journey. This is a long travels. V'oven and sin. These things weaken a person. Pachad, this type of fear. Dichsiv, the verse states, Libi Secharchar, my heart was filled with anxiety. Azvani kaichi, my strength abandoned me. Derech, a journey. Dichsiv, ina b'derech kaichi. He afflicted my strength on the way, b'derech, on the way. Ovain is sin. Dichsiv, koshal ba'avaini kaichi. Sin has weakened my strength. Shlosh dvarim, 3 things. Matiz and gufa shalodam, they tear down a person's body. The Elohain, and they are as follows. Ochal ma'umid, eating standing. V'shotzam umid, and drinking standing. V'shimish mitosim umid, and sexual relationship standing. Okay. Chamisha krevim lamisa. Okay. If a person does any of these 5 things consistently, it brings them closer to death than to life. And they are. He ate v'omad, and then he stands up immediately without waiting just to settle the food in his body. Shasa, drinking v'omad and standing up immediately. Hikaz dam, bloodletting v'omad and standing up immediately. Yoshan v'omad. As soon as a person wakes up, he stands up immediately. and Shimish Mutasev Omad sexual relationships and standing up immediately. Shishish Varim, 6 things. If a person does all these 6 things in order, Miyad Meis, he immediately dies. These things are so wearing down of a person that he can't do all 6 and expect to live. And they are as follows. Somebody comes from a journey, and he's tired. He's exhausted. Hik is dam, he lets blood. He goes into a sauna. He drinks wine. He gets inebriated. He sleeps on the ground. And he has sexual relationships. He specifically needs to do it in this order. If he does in order, he'll die. If he doesn't do it in order, then only Kollel shall become weak. So the Gemara asks, Andy, this can't be Vaha Meuris. There was a woman whose name, a man whose name was, a woman whose name was Meuris. Avda Tilsaminayu. She asked her slave to do 3 of these, Umis, and he died. You see, you don't have to do 6, even 3 of them is sufficient. So the Gemara says, Ahu Kachashava, he was someone who was already weak. And that's why even 3 of these was enough to kill him. Okay. Shmaina, 8 things. Ruban kasha. A lot of it is damaging. Umiutam, but a small amount is yafa. It's good for you. Ve'elohein, and this is the list. Derech, a journey, i.e. traveling. V'derech eretz, intimacy. Aisher, wealth. Umalacha, work. Yain, wine. Shina, sleep. Chamen, this is Rashi says this is both a hot bath and hot water. In other words, like a coffee, a hot drink. Ba'kozastam, letting blood. Shmoina mimatin es hazera. 3 things diminish the quantity of the semen. The Elohen, and they are hamelach, salt, the harov, hunger, the hanetek, leprosy, the chia, crying, shina agave karka, sleeping on the ground, the good genios, that is eating coriander, the kishus shaloi bismano, hops, that is not in season, the akozas dam lamata, letting blood below, roughly speaking, the waist. The Gemara will define. If you let blood below the waist, then that's kiflaim. That's double as damaging as any other of these practices. Just like letting blood, roughly speaking, below the waist is a bad practice. It diminishes the quality of semen doubly as any of the other bad practices. Above the waist is beneficial more than anything else. Papa says, Lamata, what's sort of the line of Lamata? Lamata minabeitzim, below the testicles. Lamalo, above, is Lamala minabeitzim, above the testicles. The kishus shaloi bismano, hops that's not in season. Hops that's not in season is bad. Tana, we learned, kishem shekosha shaloi bismano, just like hops out of season is bad for the semen quantity. Kach yafa bismana, so too in its time it's beneficial. Okay, what is its time? Papa says man, the right time is Tammuz. That's the time we're in now. Shaloi bismana, the time that it's not in season is Teves. That'll be winter time. It's neither good nor bad. Okay, and back onto subject. 5 lines from the top of Samach Ayanam and Vez. Omar, he says, Kisvu get lishti. So how did we get into the whole thing? We had the guy who got the demon of Kordaikas.
That's right. You said we're on page 70?
We're in 70b.
70b. 5 lines to the top?
5 lines to the top at 2 dots.
Okay.
So let's just sort of summarize. So we began the parak with somebody who was possessed by a demon called Kordaikas. How did he get this demon? I think he drank fresh wine, if I remember correctly. Right in here. Yeah, he drank fresh wine. It was undiluted, and he got the demon called Kordaikas. Because of that, the Gemara went on to a very long tangent of all sorts of different remedies. We also discussed the king of the demons, and in general, today we finished with good and bad health practices. Now we get back to the original question. Misha Kardaikas, someone who has a demon that possesses him, and he says, go write a divorce. What's the story? Don't listen to him. Why shouldn't you listen to him? He's crazy. What happens if the opposite happened? He's set to write a divorce for his wife. Then he was possessed by the demon of Kardaikas. And then he says, don't write a divorce. He changes his mind. What do? We write the divorce anyway. We'll see that in a moment. That isn't fully an accurate statement. So Amar Kisvu Gel Ishti. He told the people to write a divorce to his wife. And then what happened? V'ochse Kardaikas. The demon of Kardaikas took hold of him. He went crazy. He went mad. And then he changed his mind and he said, don't write it. We don't listen to him. Okay. So now let's understand. We don't listen to him, and what? And what do we do? So he said when he was normal, give a divorce. Now he's going through a phase of madness. And he says, don't write the divorce. So you don't listen to him. And what do you do? Rish Lakish says, you immediately give a divorce. In other words, you continue with what he said in the beginning. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan says, no. What it means there is that once he gets better, he doesn't need to tell you again to write a divorce. But of course, you don't give it while he's mad. My time of Rish Lakish. What's the reason of Rish Lakish? Rish Lakish says, we don't listen to the last thing that he said. We don't. 1 second. What's the reason of Rish Lakish? Because the Mishnah says if he said give a divorce to his wife and then he went mad, so we don't listen to what he says when he's mad. So what do we have left? We have left what he said before he was mad. He said to give a divorce to his wife, so therefore give a divorce. Rabbi Yochanan would argue back. What does it mean you don't listen to him? That once he becomes lucid again, he becomes normal, you don't need to ask him to reauthorize the divorce. However, but you must write a divorce once the fellow is lucid again. What's the debate? As follows: Rish Lakish compares it to a person who's sleeping, and Rabbi Yochanan compares it to a person who's mad. If a guy says give a divorce to his wife, then he goes to sleep. What's the story? Of course, he can give a divorce while he's sleeping. Says Rish Lakish, a guy who was possessed by Kardaikas, it's like he's sleeping. It's fine. Rabbi Yochanan says no. It's as if he's mad. If a person's mad, he cannot give a divorce to his wife. So therefore, you can't divorce your wife therefore we don't give the divorce while the fellow is mad. So Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan what does Rabbi Yochanan not compare it to someone who's sleeping? So Gemara says somebody who's sleeping is not missing anything. This guy is missing something. What does this mean? So like we pointed out, there's a recipe there's a potion to make for Kardaikas people, right? I believe it's lean meat on coals and diluted wine. So there's a simple solution to make the guy lucid again. All you need to do is give him, invite him to the barbecue, give him a glass of wine, and you're done. He's back to normal again. So therefore, Rish Lakish says because of the potion, the cure is so close, he's not considered mad. He's considered as if he's sleeping. I'm sorry. Rabbi Yochanan says because somebody who's sleeping doesn't require an action to get up, whereas someone who has Kardaikas needs to do an action. And Rish Lakish argues no. The solution here, when a guy is mad, there's no cure. The guy is psychotically deranged. There's no way to bring him back to reality. Maybe Charles has some lithium he can give him or something else. I don't know. But over here, this Kardaikas is a very simple solution. A barbecue basically with a glass of wine. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan says, look, you need to give him a cure. A guy who's sleeping, all he needs to do is wake up. It's going to happen naturally. And Rish Lakish says the opposite. A guy who's mad, if he's psychotically deranged, there's no cure for him. Over here, the cure is relatively simple and accessible. And therefore, we don't compare it to the guy who's mad, we compare it to somebody who's sleeping. Okay. Hold on a second. Umi Omer Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan actually say this? We have a problem with Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. But Omer of Yehudah Omer Shmuel, Rabbi Yehudah says the name of Shmuel. You have a person shachat by Shnayim. This guy was clearly being executed, and they cut through his esophagus and his trachea. A row of Shnayim, or majority of each one. The Ramaz, apparently he can no longer talk, and he sort of motioned to give a divorce to his wife. Immediately they quickly go and run and divorce his wife. Apparently it's the Jared, it's the barbecue. It's the chicken on the head, I think, was if the barbecue doesn't work. I think that was the second stage. I remember. I'll right back in. No. The chicken on the head was a guy who had heat stroke. Okay. Okay, so you have this guy who's being executed. They sort of basically cut his esophagus and trachea, and he gives a thing, go divorce his wife. They should go ahead and immediately divorce his wife very quickly because the guy doesn't have much longer to live. Similarly, the Tanya we learned, they saw him being cut to pieces, or Tzolav Sliva, he's hanging on the gallows. And again, pardon me here if this is too difficult, but the gallows we're talking about is the same way that JC was killed. It's not the modern gallows. The modern gallows kills relatively quickly, within a couple of minutes. The gallows of old was where a man was suspended by his arms from a gallows, from a pole, and it meant that every time you breathe, you have to lift up your body to breathe. The Romans is called crucifixion. The Romans, when they wanted to kill anybody, including JC, they crucified them. It's a very, very painful way of dying. Basically, the guy, sort of his last breath, he lifts himself up to take the last breath, and then he sort of is weak again and needs a breath, and he's sort of gasping for air, and it takes hours and hours to die that way. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so this guy who's Tzolav Sliva, he's going to die, but it's going to take a very, very long time. Sometimes they didn't just. Sometimes they just nailed right through his flesh as well. Didn't bother tying it. You know, guy's dying anyway, right? So he basically gives a motion, divorce his wife. Both of these people, by the way, are going to die. There's no question about it. You give it divorce. Okay, now, if Rabbi Yochanan authorizes a divorce in a place where a guy is sort of on the road to dying, then why doesn't he authorize divorce for someone who's possessed by Kardaikas? So the Gemara says, what's the question? There's no comparison. Hasam died at Silusahin. The case where the guy's on the gallows, he didn't think clearly. He'll have to think clearly for a while until he's sort of in the throes of death. It's just his weakness being on the gallows, that being in the midst of crucifixion, where he's suffering like this. However, over here, in the case of Kardaikas, the guy's mind is possessed, and therefore he doesn't have a present mind. Therefore, we don't give a divorce. So the Gemara asks, does Shmuel say that if the guy is lost his esophagus and trachea, it's been sliced through during his execution process, that he can divorce his wife? The Omer of Yehudah Omer Shmuel. Yehudah says in the name of Shmuel, let's say a guy was being executed, and they cut through a majority of his trachea or his esophagus. 1 second. And then the guy ran away. Somehow he managed to escape from the executioner, and he ran away. The halacha is midin. You can testify to his wife that he died. Why? Because somebody who's in such a situation is obviously going to die. Even if he escaped from the executioner, it's just a matter of time until he actually falls dead. Okay. 1 second. But if he's going to die, then how can you authorize that? How can you give a divorce to his wife if the guy's going to die? In other words, you're telling me that you can give a divorce to his wife because he could live. But then you're telling me that he's for sure going to die. If he's going to die, then how can you testify to his wife that your husband is dead? So Gemara says, he's alive, but he's going to die shortly. And therefore, if you get an authorization from such a person for him to divorce his wife, you immediately, quickly run through the instructions because these people do not have a very long time to live. Okay, if that's the case, if that's the case, he should go into exile. What does this mean? We'll explain in a moment. Let's see. Let's continue the Gemara. Aloma Tanya, why do we learn? Shochet by Shnayim, Arov Shnayim. So there was an accident. The guy was felling trees, let's say, with a chainsaw, and he accidentally sliced through his friend's esophagus and trachea. Or I don't know if that scenario you don't like, you'll find some other scenario where it happened by accident. By the way, in order for you to go to exile, it has to be downward. It has to be downward motion. Downward motion. Somehow by mistake, he sliced through the guy's the fellow's main organs in his neck. Now, if somebody kills by accident, the halacha is at the time of the temple, they would go to Golus, they would go to exile. One of 6 cities, 3 on either side of the Jordan River. And you'd have to stay in those cities until the Kohen Gadol passes away. But somebody, okay, so imagine the typical example. The Gemara, a guy was felling trees with an axe, and by mistake, he knocks the tree down and kills the person. He goes to exile, fine. But the guy with the chainsaw, who's knocking down trees with a chainsaw, and he chainsaws the guy's esophagus and trachea, what's the story there? That guy does not go to exile. Why not? The guy's certainly going to die. So majority of trachea, majority of esophagus, he's certainly going to die. How come he doesn't go to exile? So Gemara explains, we learned, there are 2 competing theories. One theory is that actually the reason that there's an aggravating factor here, not just of the person who killed him with the chainsaw accident, but also from the wind, because the wind blows on an open wound. That sort of causes it causes him to die faster. So therefore, it wasn't just the guy who killed him by accident that's responsible for his death, but it's also the wind. Another possibility is when a person is wounded, is mortally wounded like that, they start running around trying to search for help, and that accelerates their death. And therefore, you can't blame their death completely on the guy who was responsible for the accident. What's the difference between these 2 opinions? The difference is the shachta besa. Apparently, there was a slaughtering accident, and that's how he sort of slaughtered a human being by accident. But it happened with base the shisha in a house of marble. If you recall, in the Talmudical parlance, a house of marble is the ideal place for surgery. All the surgeries were all done in a house of marble or a 7.5 brick stick.
Those are easy to clean.
I'm sorry?
Those are easy to clean.
Because there's no winds, there's no draft in such a house. And therefore, if there's no draft, if it was a slaughtering accident where somebody kills another person by accident, slaughtering him in a house of marble, there's no wind. So if there's no wind, then the wind could not have accelerated the guy's death. But if the reason is because somebody who's been mortally wounded this way kills himself, that reason still applies. Alternatively, or this accident happened outside, but let's say there was some sort of shock trauma as well that knocked him unconscious. So he didn't participate in accelerating the mortality of his mortal wounds. And therefore, but the wind is there if it happened outside. So in that case, the fellow, there's the other reason, the wind is present as an aggravating factor for his death. Let's just begin the next Gemara. Okay, somebody who became mute, he lost his ability to talk. So he gives these motions. So they check him. They ask him 3 obvious questions, and he nods his head yes this way, and he says no this way, or the opposite, whatever you prefer. Okay, so Gemara says maybe he had some sort of seizure. I don't know. I just want to translate this word. whatever. Right? They don't give an English word for it. Okay, maybe he has this sort of seizure or this twitch that he always nods his head yes, yes. Or maybe he got the seizure where he nods his head yes, yes instead of no, no. What you do is you alternate questions. Yes, no, no, yes, no, no, yes. We'll see in a moment. Maybe he has this type of seizure where he nods one way and then nods the other way, and then nods this way and then nods the other way. So how do you know he actually is cogent? He's actually he's lucid, he's communicating with you. Maybe he just has a seizure. So the Gemara says, so you ask him a question where the obvious answer is no, then two questions where the obvious answer is yes, then two questions of no, then an answer of yes. And such a seizure would never occur, presumably. So therefore we know the guy is lucid and therefore we trust him when he's nodding his intention to divorce his wife. The Rabbi Shmuel offered another explanation. You ask him an obvious question about summertime and wintertime, and about wintertime and summertime. The Gemara presumes what's the obvious question? You ask him, you give him a coat. You say, do you want a coat? Do you want gloves? Do you want boots? And then you say to him, do you want short sleeves, shorts, and a bathing suit? So let's say if the question was answered in summertime, then you want to hear the no's to the boot, the coat, and the gloves, and you want the yes to the bathing suit, the shorts, and the short sleeves. So the Gemara says that mind you, what exactly are we talking about? We're talking about coats and coats and linen sheets. So coat for winter, linen sheet for summer. Maybe he got a illness, or he feels cold even in summer, or he feels warm. I'm sorry, he feels cold in summer, and therefore he needs to be heated up in the summer, or he feels cold in the winter. Or he in other words, in summer he has an illness of heat where he needs to be heated up. He feels cold in the summer, he needs to be heated up in the summer, or he feels hot in the winter and he needs to be cooled down in the winter. So maybe that's why he would ask for the opposite in each season, because he has this illness where he needs to be warmed in the summer and cooled in the winter. So Mara says, Ela b'peri, we talk about seasonal fruits. You ask him if he wants mango, cherries, and peaches in the winter, and if he wants oranges and grapefruits and apples in summer. I'm sorry, in the winter time. I'm sorry, in summertime, where that would be out of season. Okay, that's sort of how you figure out whether or not he's lucid or not. Great day.